Hello, and welcome to the Three Links Oddcast, your podcast for all things having to do with Odd Fellowship. And now, here are your hosts. Hello, this is Toby Hansen of the Three Links Oddcast. On this show, we're featuring the second half of the special crossover episode we did with our friends and brothers, Josh and Billy from the Modern Goat Rider podcast. If you're not familiar with their podcast, go check it out and listen to the first half of this episode. Otherwise, nothing we talk about will make sense to you. You can find their podcast at moderngoatrider.com. You can also subscribe to their podcast feed wherever you subscribe to the Three Links Oddcast. As a further incentive to check out Modern Goat Rider, Josh and Billy recorded a brief promo sharing what their podcast is all about.
Josh and I are here. We are the Modern Goat Rider podcast. We are so pumped on all things Oddfellowish, and we discovered we don't know that much. So we're doing the show so that we can get people to contact us, do an interview, teach us and the listeners all about their lodges or their jurisdiction. And of course, we love to talk about the vitality of Victoria. We're so big on positivity of what's happening in the order around the world. And even though there's unpleasant things happening in lodges, we are still looking forward to the future of Odd Fellowship in 2021.
And with that, here's episode 13 of the Three Links Oddcast. Now, as I recall, Sergio was just about to answer a question.
I was just going to say, I think one of the things that needs to be thought about and discussed is maybe, everybody, or state or district or however it's set up, everybody gets like a handful, a group of people and say, hey, if you guys don't mind responding to emails, or if you guys are, do you mind, taking charge on these days, and that way, instead of having just one person in charge of this very wide area, we're kind of just, chopping it up into little pieces to where more people are willing. So I'm in Southern California. And anybody who's familiar with California, Northern California, it's its whole entire entity. So if you get, from each lodge, like one person who, or like a group of people who say, okay, for whatever reason, we're going to monitor, let's say, like the Grand Lodge of California's emails. And on these days, this is what we're going to do. And I think creating a system or thinking outside of the box, it gives us more people to respond, gives us younger people to, inject more energy. And at the same time, it gives people a little taste of, like non-officer positions, like non-commissioned, if you will, to where, they're kind of getting their feet wet, kind of taking more responsibility, but at the same time, it's only one day out of the week or something.
Right.
So I think if we start thinking it in terms of that, we might have more success as far as instead it's just one person, who's in their 70s. They only log on to the internet once a week and, they're too busy doing other things. So
fire up the old Dell.
They're waiting for the dial up and they're hoping no one calls the house phone, so stuff like that.
Yeah.
So you're proposing more of like a communications committee at each jurisdictional level of people who are a little bit with it and know how to respond to things quickly and efficiently.
Like say everybody's really missing the lodge right now and they're really trying to fill that void, taking on a responsibility like this, you get to interact with people who are interested and you kind of get people out there, get people responding to each other. So it's just kind of that whole networking instead of like my theory with the big lodges, if you kind of concentrate everything in one spot, it's very easy to kind of miss the wider area.
Yeah, and I agree. And my follow up to Ainsley was that that list that he talks about is something that in COVID, we can't give somebody the exposure to a meeting, which in some cases is good, right? They're not going to show up and learn that the furnace is down and the roof needs to be fixed and there's no money for repairing the hall. But we can, you could give them a digital communication list. Like, this is how the person who's inquiring between the age of 29 and 52, because that's their kids are now at university, they're all plugged into something. And if there's like a digital list of, all right, these podcasts exist, these Facebook groups exist, try contacting a lodge who has Zoom meetings. And then for other cases, maybe there's things about associate membership. Maybe the taste that I got a bad taste from the associate membership situation in BC, because I had an inquiry from Nova Scotia who said, I'd really like to join Columbia Lodge as an associate and attend your meetings. And it was like, okay, great. So that's cool, but can that happen because he's outside jurisdiction? Yada, yada, yada. Toby gave me a good answer, but I think that it might be what goes to Grand's Sovereign Grand, is even just Grand Lodges, is this is how you deal with the digital world right now for an inquiry. It's not send an email and wait. It's listen to this. It's check this out. It's Google Oddfellows in your community. Find out where they're doing Ton of Love. Find out where they're doing Oddfest. This type of stuff. So I'm jumping all over that with kind of a lot of pepper and vinegar, but I mean, Ainsley has a great idea, and Sergio's got a great idea on communication as well. Put them together.
It's interesting that you mentioned that list, Billy, because I haven't built the site yet, but I've already registered askmeimay-know.com. And I'm planning on making it just a single page link tree of just the big hits. So it'll have like the Sovereign website. It'll have the Heart and Hand on it. It'll have both you and us, the two podcasts, and any other relevant quality links. So that way I could have, and then if somebody does decide to do a back channel lodge map, I could put it there as opposed to trying to put it on the Sovereign page because of all the workaround issues with that. So that way, what I'll have is a back channel website that would still be functional enough as a link tree of just a list of things that you could just send to somebody. Be like, oh, you're asking about Oddfellows. Here's Ask Me I May Know. It's got all the websites on it you'll need to find the answers you want, and let me know if you got any other questions. And here you go. And it's basically like serve them on a platter all the top Oddfellow things that are happening to get them interested and educated before they even go into it. So
essentially we're kind of describing two different ways to approach it. Ainsley, your original idea is actually something I think we should get together and do at Sovereign next year.
Yes.
Put together a brief presentation, and not just to the Secretaries and Scribes Association, do the presentation for the entire Sovereign Grand Lodge and say, okay, we've got the most important Oddfellows from each jurisdiction in the entire world in one room. Everybody sit and listen for 10 minutes because we're going to teach you why you have to keep your eyes open to the world around you so that membership inquiries can be dealt with in a timely manner. But at the same time, since we know that doesn't always happen because Grand Secretary Elmer in, some small jurisdiction somewhere, Rhode Island or Nebraska or something like that, he only turns on his computer once a week because he doesn't need all of that junk and stuff they do on the internet. And so he's not always aware of what's coming in. Because of that, we need our own sort of independent chain of communication. So like today, Sergio, you got the email from someone in Tennessee who wants to join a lodge, referred him to the Grand Lodge of Tennessee, and they haven't heard anything back yet. Well, I've visited Grand Lodge sessions in other jurisdictions, small ones, And sometimes the Grand Lodge office is a closet in a lodge hall, and the Grand Secretary only drops by once or twice a month to check the email and see if any mail has come in. So in situations like that, we need to have another way of communicating. Now, I've been fortunate since I traveled a lot as Grand Master. I know people in all of the neighboring jurisdictions to talk to. So if I need to refer somebody to a lodge in Montana or Idaho, or even parts of British Columbia, I know people out there, and so I can find the people and not necessarily have to go through the Grand Secretary. BC has an excellent Grand Secretary now, but the previous Grand Secretary, I love him. He's a great guy, but he was one of those Grand Secretaries who did the job as much as he felt it needed to be done. And so that kind of regular, timely communication didn't always happen.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel like it needs to be a combination effort of us working on the outside, kind of the back channel network that we've developed as members to get hold of people that we know will respond, and also retraining the official sort of channels so that way we can rebuild that, you know, that chain of command to actually work. Because as it is right now, there are far too many fail points where any of the conversations can go die. So even if you do get a Grand Secretary who is with it and they then pass the information on to the Lodge Secretary, then how many Lodge Secretaries out there are ones that are only still snail mail, or they don't respond to anything because they don't want to pay for a stamp, or they don't want to make a phone call. So there's so many points of failure right now on the chain of communication that you have to kind of come up with 3 or 4 different ways to get to the same spot, because you don't know where you're going to hit a roadblock.
Yeah. You guys are amazing, but it's time to let this dead horse stop being beaten. Quickly, as you know, there's a lot of good news going out there right now in Odd Fellowship. Has anybody got any recent triumphs that they've heard about, whether in person, on the internet, or around the world, that they can share with us tonight?
Well, I think any of us who are on Facebook have heard about the new lodge in Louisiana that was just chartered, Themis number 75. That's in Alexandria, Louisiana. I was very fortunate because when Susan Yellett, who's the past assembly president in Louisiana, she went to the institution ceremony, and as she was driving home, she actually called me and said, "Toby, guess what? We've got a new lodge." I heard about that one right away. I heard about it on Saturday. And that is really great because there are new lodges popping up. As much as we look at Odd Fellowship and go, oh, we used to have 1.2 million members and there were 300 lodges in this jurisdiction and 800 there, and there were 400 there, and now we have 20 lodges in the jurisdiction. It's easy to get into that funk of going, oh, we used to be so great. We're still pretty darn good, and people are still waking up and going, yeah, Odd Fellowship is wonderful. I'm going to put in the effort and start a lodge.
Yeah. And just to go and kind of throw in right now, one of the local lodges in my area, San Fernando 365, they're really thinking outside of the box as far as like giving back to their community. For Halloween, they had this whole like drive-through haunted house where families could just go take the kids, roll down the windows, you know, they get their little treats, or they can at least see something instead of the TV. And then this past weekend, they had another drive-through event where, you know, you could take your kids, and they had like dental hygienists come, and they do like quick little drive-through dental checks, and they gave out toothbrushes and all that. So even though like where I'm at, everybody's starting to lock down again, you know, there's still lodges out there thinking outside of the box, still trying to give back and doing as much as they can within the wiggle room that they have. So I mean, that's always, I think that stands out, and especially to the people of the communities that they're in. So that's always good.
I think Oddfellows for a while have had to be so resourceful and work with what little we have, that a lot of lodges are really excelling at that, thinking outside the box and accepting this challenge just like any other challenge that has come our way. Because, you know, when I go through, you know, on Instagram and see what the, you know, or on Facebook and see what lodges are doing, you know, the virtual meet and greets to try to get interested people to just meet them via Zoom. I think one of the Georgia lodges was just doing that. And I think one of the New Jersey lodges is doing that as well recently. So there's a lot of, they're doing stuff to try to get that engagement up, even though it can't necessarily be that traditional in-person mixers or meet and greets or open houses, and just trying to do stuff within the means of what we've got. And it might not be the fanciest, it might not be the best, but we're not the fanciest either. So, you know, we're okay with maybe being a little humble and just kind of doing something that's a little lower key. And just because we're doing it, and instead of just being like, you know, they want to do stuff and they're trying to do it the best they can. And I think it just shows the resourcefulness of our group as a whole to try to make it work by doing the outdoor degrees. I mean, that's genius, you know, where it's, you know, warm enough to do it. Anything like that. Like I applaud all the lodges and members that are really kind of digging deep to try to figure out a way to make it work as best as they can.
Now, there's another example of something great. You mentioned the lodge in New Jersey, Family 293, that just got their charter recently.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Will and Mario from that lodge, they worked very hard to be able to get that new lodge going, and they're working on getting a Rebecca Lodge and an encampment going there. So there are places. And then one of our shout outs recently went to, I think it was Washington Irving number 20 in New York, which was just rechartered recently. So there's growth happening. There are these wonderful examples of Odd Fellowship that are starting to come back. I think it was last year that Plano number 114 in Texas came back.
Mm-hmm.
There is enough interest in places where you can get things organized and where you've got support from your Grand Lodge, you can get things started. Another fairly recent example are the two lodges that came back in Atlanta.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
that was,
absolutely.
What, 3 years ago?
Not even. That was 2 years ago. Yeah. That was 2 years ago. That was a year and a half. I take that back. It was a year and a half ago. It was the spring before, like right when we turned 200. Yeah.
Yeah. Because didn't Tory come to Sovereign that year in North Carolina?
Yes. Yeah. And he won the Heart and Hand off the parade float.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there is growth. That's the kind of good news I want to hear, babes.
And
okay? That's what I want to hear.
I haven't been, the webmaster person for super long, for so many years. But when I started it, like, what was that, like 3 years ago ish or something? You didn't hear of any lodges opening except in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Like, other than that, there were no lodges opening. And in the last 3 years or so, there have been more and more lodges coming online or being chartered or reinstituted.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the last year's numbers for at Sovereign for the membership, the bleed was far less. Of course, this year is gonna throw everything for a loop. I think this is gonna be this is gonna be a throwaway year. I think we're gonna lose a lot of lodges, unfortunately, and a lot of members. But I think, it's probably a purge that was just one that was just postponed by its own 5 years or so. Yeah. So I think it's just the inevitable coming to fruition all at once is probably what we'll see, is what I expect. But the growth is what you need to look at, not the lodges that were just hanging on by the skin of their teeth for the last 15 years.
Yeah. So I gotta throw a semi-tangent into here. So Ainsley said that we were being resourceful and that we're thinking outside of the box, as Sergio said. So I got a question for you, brothers. What does bury the dead mean to you now, and how can lodges do that part of their mission? Sergio.
Burying the dead, besides the literal funeral procession and all that, It could be more philosophical, remembrance. There's an example in a lodge in Texas where one of their predominant members ended up passing, and they paid their respects. They have tattoos in honor of them and everything. They share stories. Even though he's passed some time now, you still see him pop up on the internet. So if you didn't know, you would still think this guy was still around. So there's things we could do beyond the morning and the day, when we actually put our brother or sister to rest. We could do things as far as like set up funds or charities in their names. We could create little like challenges or awards or something to kind of keep their name out there, keep their essence in the lodge and in an active part of the community once they're gone. So burying the dead, I think, is just something I had kind of mentioned in the article I had wrote, is just, being remembered after you're gone. That's something that some people really don't think about until it's kind of too late, about what do they leave behind. So for us, I think because we have this unique relationship with cemeteries and passing and everything, we could create traditions of just honoring our members, in our own unique ways, to make sure that once they're gone, they're not forgotten. And that's
Right.
how we could bury our dead.
Those are cool ideas.
Thank you.
Ainsley?
I feel like with my lodge, we have kind of taken bury the dead almost a little sort of literal-ish in a way. So the way we incorporated that is like a year or so ago, we actually sponsored a class at the local museum to have a professional historic preservationist that focuses on tombstones come to teach a class on how to properly care for headstones and gravestones and how to properly clean them, because there's a lot of bad information on the internet that can actually do more long-term damage to these monuments than what you might realize. So we all took this class. We got some little books and stuff. And one of the things we hoped to do was to maybe go out and do some sort of like kind of casual headstone cleaning thing. But we haven't been able to do that yet. And then COVID came and just everything got screwed up. But that would be like kind of a cool lodge activity where, you just kind of pick a rundown cemetery for the day and you just go out there with your buckets and your soapy water and you literally just care for the dead and clean up some headstones and maybe, learn a little history at the same time.
Yeah, cool. Toby?
Well, I'm going to look at this from more of a jurisdictional perspective. And one thing we had to deal with at the Grand Lodge of Washington was defunct lodges that had a cemetery left over and dealing with finding someone to care for that. So what I would say, when we bury the dead now, we have to think of our overall legacy as an organization, because in many places, our cemeteries have outlived our lodges. So we have to go as an organization and make sure that those cemeteries are not abandoned, not neglected. We have to make sure that going forward, there is a way of making sure that the dignity that was accorded those persons when they were buried is carried on in perpetuity. If you listen to Brother Michael on our cemetery episode, where he was talking about what a burden the Oddfellows Rest became in New Orleans, that was something that the lodge at the time did not plan ahead for. They weren't thinking 150 years into the future, because, of course, in 1849, Louisiana Lodge number 1 was the going concern in town, and it was impossible to imagine there would be a future without that lodge to care for that cemetery. So, having been Grand Master and had to deal with cemetery properties after a lodge is gone, you have to think about coming up with some way to ensure there will be continuing care for those grounds. And in a lot of cases, those get turned over to, if it's in a city, it can go to the city parks department and they will end up maintaining the cemetery. If it's in a rural area, sometimes there's a county cemetery board or cemetery district that can take on that challenge. But it's a really serious obligation / burden that we have to treat with a lot of respect and do the best that we can to make sure that that lasting legacy of an Oddfellows cemetery always speaks well of our commitment to bury the dead.
That's a great point, Toby. I do get a lot of disgruntled emails from relatives of people that are interred in Oddfellows cemeteries throughout the continent. And every time I have to send the same reply. I'm sorry, here's the information to the Grand Lodge. I cannot confirm if that cemetery is indeed under their care or if it's gone to the county or the state, but here is the contact information. If it is still, under the auspices of the Oddfellows, please, let them know. And hopefully somebody can, get the cemetery taken care of. But it's a lot of times it's just dependent on volunteers, because if it's the city or the state or the county, they're going to do the bare minimum. They might mow it maybe once in the spring, and that's it. And the stones are all going to be wonked from the thaw, and they'll be falling over, and they'll just mow over it. And it's sad that whenever the cemeteries do go to basically into the public domain, for lack of a better term, the care just goes downhill rapidly. And maybe that is something that lodges in different districts should kind of re-adopt Oddfellows cemeteries that are no longer, officially ours, but still bear our names, because at the end of the day, it's still an Oddfellows cemetery, no matter who's paying the taxes on it or whatever.
That's right. Yeah, so I've got two.
right.
One was Columbia and one was Victoria. So the Columbia one is, for the 200th anniversary, we bought 200 memorial flags from the great Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. It's not a state, right? Isn't it?
That's right.
It's a Commonwealth. Yeah.
They elect our presidents now.
Jake Tapper taught me that one on CNN on election night. So what we did was, they were the only place I could find 200 flags. Shipped them up here, and we had them for the anniversary. So we did two things. We did an anniversary Oddfellows cemetery tour of Ross Bay Cemetery, and then myself and another member walked around. We told stories about 24 Oddfellows that were buried there. And then
Awesome.
In the summertime, we placed, and it hadn't been recorded since 1893. We did a decoration day where we went and marked 200 grave sites of Oddfellows in two different cemeteries: the Jewish cemetery in the north central part of the city, and then in the south part of the city at Ross Bay. That was the Columbia one. The one that I thought was different and more interesting was Victoria one. They're more of a social, but they also they sort of do outreach a little bit differently, in that they're not necessarily hard promoting for members. What they will do is, they did a speakers series, and it went for, Ed May has talked about this on our podcast, and they had done multiple times. Guest speakers came in who are not Oddfellows, and they talked about something. They talked about their adventure to the North Pole, or they talked about this experience they had. But for two of them, they did preparations for end of life and about hospice. And so they treated it very differently. Instead of memory, they were like on the present day side of it, to be preparation and how to deal with death as an important part of life, and to not fear it. And it was more than just getting your will done. It was pretty cool. And you had one.
Yeah, well, I'm not really a cemetery guy. I'm a people person. Our lodge is a young lodge. So God forbid we're going to have to bury any of our members anytime soon. However, what my vice grand this year has instilled is a bereavement committee, because we're finding that our members are starting to lose their parents on a regular basis. And burying the dead might not necessarily just mean our members, but also supporting our members in the loss of their families as well. So we've created a group of people who are, we have a member who's a lawyer, and we have a member who's a caterer, and we have a member who's, who knows how to create events, or just a way to support each member within anything that's going on, anything that they need help with during that really hard time. So we've kind of adopted a different idea of what bury the dead might mean necessarily.
It's tying in relieve the distress.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It is
That's
a relief.
fantastic.
We're relieving the distress, our brothers or sisters who are having the hardest time of their life at that point, just to be able to support them in a way that they feel comfortable, and that we can be there for them with whatever they need.
So do any of your lodges provide the traditional death benefit to any of your members?
We do. Yeah, we have. I mean, the death benefit is so outdated that it's really a token. It's not enough to cover much. And we are sort of revamping our bylaws right now. And I don't remember if that was ever brought up, a changing of that amount. Again, we do, brothers, will attend the ceremony in full regalia, and a benefit will be sent to the family of the deceased, an amount that, it's more of a token than anything that's really going to make a huge difference in their lives. Although some people, it does make enough of a difference.
I don't even know if ours is even in our bylaws, but we do I think we do $100, like if a member has lost like an immediate family member or like a parent or something. So.
Yeah, we haven't really done any benefits for people losing family members. So we will, if a brother passes away, they will get a death benefit. Do you guys have a specific death benefit for members?
That's a really good question. Our lodge is, only 5 years old back into the fold. So I'll have to look into our bylaws to see if we actually have. I don't think there is any mention of an actual benefit. I think we're just kind of following the jurisdictional tradition of what other lodges do. And unfortunately, I don't know what our actual member benefit would be if a lodge member passed. Because the way we've been doing the benefit is like doing a donation to like say if somebody's father had passed, and they in lieu of flowers want to do a donation to the library. So we've done stuff like that, or to St. Jude's Children's Hospital. We've done a number of those, but luckily we haven't lost anybody but I would have to, kind of see what the going culture of what happens in Illinois when a member does pass, how much they're giving to the families at that point. So
Tobias, do you have any insight?
Well, in the bylaws that I've reviewed, because having been a member of the Grand Lodge here for 17 years, eventually you get stuck on the bylaws review committee. I have not seen any bylaws that include a death benefit for members or their families. That's something that over the years has been cycled out. We just haven't done it for a long time. However, I do know of a lodge in Canada that is still doing not just the death benefits, but they still do the sick benefits, unemployment, etc. When I was at the Grand Lodge of Montana session a couple years ago, they had a very large contingent from the Grand Lodge of Alberta, because those two Grand Lodges work very closely together. So I was talking with some of the brothers from the lodge in Lethbridge, Alberta, and they were telling me that Lethbridge still does all of that. They actually have a lot of young, sort of early professional age members, like 25 to 35. And so for those members, especially who have been working a lot of part-time, putting multiple jobs together and, doing like 3 part-time jobs, that benefit is really helpful to them. And I found it interesting that, you wouldn't think of Lethbridge, Alberta as being a big major place necessarily. It's fairly small by Canadian city standards, but that lodge finds it useful to be able to do that.
It never says in your bylaws how to get members to join, but it'll certainly drive members away.
Yes. Now would be a perfect time to take a break and listen to a message from our sponsor, Pig and a Pug Bath Stuff.
This is an actor portrayal. Hi, I'm Amanda, the brains and brawn behind Pig and a Pug, where I use only the best materials to give you the best products possible. For those that don't know, I'm based in the beautiful mountains of Montana, and right now it's very cold outside, so this is the perfect opportunity to give you guys a little bit of a news update. I just wanted to take a quick second to announce the upcoming release of our Christmas-themed soaps that will be shipping the first week of December. These will make fantastic gifts for those you love. With 6 different custom-tailored scents, there will be something for everyone. Know any Harry Potter fans? We have a selection of soaps for both kids and adults that will be shipping this coming week. We are also planning some Harry Potter-related giveaways for the launch, so make sure you get involved. We also have a variety of 8-ounce scented candles, sugar scrubs, and bath bombs. If this sounds up your or someone you know's alley, look us up on Facebook and on Etsy. Just search Pig and a Pug. Did you get that? Pig and a Pug. Also, as a special thank you for your support, we are offering all listeners of the Three Links Oddcast a special coupon code for 24% off your order. Just use the code THANKYOU24 at checkout. And I'll say it again, Pig and a Pug.
And now, back to the show.
It's interesting you were talking about benefits and we don't really do it on the regular, but definitely when COVID hit, we told every single one of our members that if you need money right now to pay for groceries, to pay your rent, whatever it is, come to us and we will. Yeah, we all this, like, it was kind of an interesting moment because we took it down and said, okay, we got to stop thinking about the community for a second here and let's just really focus in on our membership. And it was kind of a rallying cry for a moment where, okay, does anybody here really is there need here right now? And we had a couple of members who needed $500 and we gave it to them immediately. It was so, that was all of a sudden this is why we're here. This is why we're together. We got that feeling for, and it was through emergency, through this pandemic that we realized that, and for sure, anytime during the year or any year, if one of our members came to us and said, hey, I could really use, I lost my job and I need some money, we would do it in a heartbeat. And we try and do it without them having to stand up and lodge and say that they need, it's like, okay, we have a member who's in distress and we want to relieve that. And, but it didn't happen that often. But with, with the pandemic, we got to kind of go, hey, this is one of the reasons that we come together. This is a moment where we really can benefit from the fact that we're in this organization and we're in this group and we care about each other and we have these resources and we're able to take care of each other. And that was amazing, that feeling.
Now, here's a follow-up question to that. Does your lodge have a formal visiting committee?
Well,
we have had a visiting committee.
That sounds like a no.
I'll go to the bylaws. So we are reviewing the bylaws, and we were reading the bylaws, and everybody was like, "Really? That's who's on the visiting committee? Okay."
The Noble Grand, the Vice Grand, and like 3 other members or whatever.
The chaplain.
Yeah, it's like the past Grand. It's like a complete surprise. Everybody was like, "Whoa!" So Bastion does have an official visiting committee, and they're actually / bereavement. So they work really hard at sisters who need help, whether it's a passing of a family member or whether it's they're out of work, or not out of work, but if they're sick. And my wife is part of that committee. So I hear about those things. It is not the description as probably in their bylaws. But for us, we had a member who stood up and said, yeah, I'm going to take charge and I'm going to lead this thing. And then we were like, okay, so let's frame it up. And that just didn't kind of happen well enough. And I don't know if you guys have the same sort of experience when it comes to it. It's the gap from
visitor to visiting, like for the amount of visiting that's needed.
Oh yeah, well we would visit Ron in the hospital. Everybody
Sure.
went and visited Ron, but
Okay,
I mean,
but then months go by before we need somebody else. Somebody else needs to be visited.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say is that what happened to Columbia, I think, happens to a lot of lodges, which is the guys and the girls from the 80s who were part of visiting committees aren't members anymore. So the legacy and the teaching of what is important, we kind of have to learn again. And so we stand up and go, well, what is visiting committee? Well, nobody's sick. Nobody's reported sick. I think in today's world, it's different than just reporting someone's sick. It's probably hearing that someone's struggling, hearing that somebody's having a mental health challenges. So I'd like to hear what you guys see as far as visiting committee as well.
Well, my home lodge, Ballard Alki in Seattle, they have a very active visiting committee. And what they do basically what's outlined in the code and digest, which is to have the committee to go visit people when they know they're in distress. But they also serve as sort of a discreet way for lodges to express, or not lodges, but members to express to the lodge that they're having a problem and they're not able to deal with it on their own, and they might need some assistance with it. So, for example, if you're someone who has lost a job and you're between paychecks, you're having a hard time and you don't want to stand up in lodge and say, yeah, I'm broke and I need food for the kids, you can go to the visiting committee, and the visiting committee will then stand up in lodge and say, we have, because there's the section report of the visiting committee. They can then stand up and say, we know of a member who is in distress and could use the relief of the lodge. We make a motion to donate $100 or whatever an appropriate sum is to that member. And in that way, you can have a way of members to still remain anonymous and get the help that they need from the lodge. Because our roots are, 300-400 years ago, when life was really tough and people pooled money to help each other out. That's the basis of Odd Fellowship right there.
Yeah, I like the sound of that. I like that sort of anonymous submission.
Yeah, and I think it's important. It's important for the rest of the lodge to realize that that's where they need to go if they are in distress, is to the visiting committee, which isn't necessarily where you would think that you would go automatically. A lot of people would say, oh, talk to the finance committee or talk to the Noble Grand or the Past Grand, right? But the visiting committee, that makes a lot of sense. And I think if you can put it out there early in the year or every year saying, hey, if you are in distress and you need something, the visiting committee is where you need to go. That would give the visiting committee a little bit more direction or, action over the year.
Yeah, I think they would get cred
for sure.
Yeah. And it provides a way to make our membership even that much more meaningful, because it's very meaningful in sort of an esoteric way. You belong to something that's important, that other people care about you, but knowing that you have the backup of your lodge brothers and sisters willing to share some of their resources to help you out in a time of need, that's another way that says, hey, Odd Fellowship is really, really valuable. It's really worth being a part of.
I just was going to say that, getting that point across, that joining the lodge, a Odd Fellows Lodge, gives you bit of the protection from if life goes sideways. We're not going to. This is not the Illuminati. We're not going to show you how to make $1 million. But the idea that
Thanks for joining us, Sergio.
is that why you joined, Sergio? You're such a new guy. You're still waiting for the gold to
Of course.
recipe for gold, right?
That's right. I'm a COVID baby. So this
you gotta WhatsApp that certain phone number, and then the $1 million will appear in your account.
That's how it works. Okay.
no way.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily the
sorry.
Illuminati, but
Yeah. Well, I just think that the promotion of kind of the principles of relieving the distress and having that as sort of part of our value proposition to a new member is we have a charity method, we have a social method, and then we have this life going sideways pillar to help out. And you're not going to come in and get rich, but you're going to be able to come and just say, I'm here to help my brother or my sister. And when life goes sideways for me, they'll be here. And it might be completely new to somebody like who grew up sibling free or grew up in a very small community where there weren't a lot of friends.
Mhm.
And so
the way it was sold to me too was that it wasn't just you. Like, actually, it wasn't me. It was like if your friend or your parent or somebody you know's house burnt down, you can stand up and lodge and request $500 for that person, and that's a pretty neat mechanism to have. And it wasn't about, Josh, if you have problems, you can stand up and lodge and give $500. No, it was more like you have the power to give to the people around you, which is a whole other power. But
it's not it's not what somebody's thinking about every day, right?
No.
Like it's the novelty of Odd Fellowship is that you can do that.
Absolutely.
Now, I have a question. How much have each of you traveled around and visited other lodges? And what kind of experiences have you had with that? Obviously, you guys in Victoria, you're on an island. So there are a few lodges that are really easy to visit. And then you got to take a ferry to get anywhere else.
Right. Yeah. So I visited the lodges in my city that are in my lodge hall. And that is it. Like I've said before on the podcast, I started out extremely insulated, and I kind of just said, hey, I just want to make my lodge the best lodge ever, and I'm not going to worry about everything else that's going on in the rest of the province, because I kept hearing challenging stories about it, and then the world at large, and so on. So I've had very little experience outside of my lodge, and it's been through the podcast and through Facebook and meeting brothers and sisters from around the world through these mediums that I've learned the most that I've ever learned. So I don't have a lot of experience. Billy?
I worked in Portland for a short time, so I went to Peninsula 128 and met for a social with David Shear. Had a great tour, but I have not been to a meeting at another lodge other than the Victoria lodges, which are already different enough between the three. But you guys have seen much more as a grand, what do you call it again? No.
Master.
Master. But what about Sergio? Because you've got a lot of lodges around there, but you're new.
Yeah, and my timing sucks apparently, so there's that. I did visit another one where I was initiated, so that's 2. And I was in the works to visiting all the local ones until obviously things kind of pumped the brakes. But like you mentioned, pretty much I've stuck to right now. The internet is the main thing. The chat rooms. I don't really do Facebook too much. I have my Discord for interested members and new members. But as far as physical lodges, not too many, just 2, but I'm hoping to spread that out.
And Ainsley, what about you? I know you've been to other lodges.
I have, and for the most part, I get the chance to see other lodges on regional degree days. So that is the way I have been able to get out and visit other lodges. Is pretty much every spring I try to get out and go to. I always go to the one in Mount Zion every year. We didn't have it this year, unfortunately, but that's where I was made. And so I like to go there and that's the closest one to bring our lodge to. So I try to, bring a good little group with me each year to that. And then try to go to at least one more to just experience a different lodge, a different feeling, a different look. But as far as like regular meetings, other than the ones that, for me going up the road to go to where, Rebecca encampment is up an hour from me, I don't have a ton of lodges under my belt like Toby does.
I really love the experience of visiting other lodges, because if you've ever had a guest in your lodge, you know what a big deal that is now. It used to be back in the old days, traveling and visiting lodges was a very common thing. Billy, I think you posted a traveling gavel from British Columbia on Facebook. And I actually went back and looked very closely at the inscription on there and discovered it's from Sullivan Lodge in Kimberley, BC. I spent pretty much every summer, at least a week in Kimberley from about 1996 through 2010 or so, because they had the accordion celebration in Kimberley. So every year, the first full week of July, I'd go up to Kimberley and hang out for 7 days with all the other crazy accordion players who don't get enough socialization normally. So it was cool to see that from Kimberley, but it used to be so common to go visit lodges, and especially lodges that were in a border region. One of the things that I did while I was Grand Master is I did a lot of historical research looking at old proceedings of the Grand Lodge of Washington. And it's really, really impressive how much cross-border cooperation there used to be when the lodge from Revelstoke, for example, would come down and visit lodges in northeastern Washington, because a lot of those communities, it's easier to cross the border into British Columbia and get to things up there than it is to drive 2.5 hours to Spokane. So a lot of that used to happen. Or lodges that were right on the Idaho border, there was a lot of interchange where Tuesday night they would come to Clarkston and have pie after lodge, but then Thursday night everybody would go into Lewiston, Idaho and have pie. So visiting used to be a big deal. Now, if you get a visitor once a year in a lodge, it's a big deal and everybody is excited about it. So if you get the chance to visit and you're going to a lodge somewhere else, it is super fun. And especially for me, having attained some high rank in the order, when an officer of the Sovereign Grand Lodge shows up for visitation, people go nuts. They're so excited about it. They're like, he's from the Sovereign Grand Lodge and he's here at our little lodge. Yes, I am here. I have come to bless you all with my presence.
Do you tickle the keys for them at that point?
Yeah. Yes, if the piano is still functional, I will play.
the most out of tune opening ode ever.
Yeah. Okay, so follow up. So bucket list lodge visit. You get one. Who's on the top of your bucket list for a lodge hall visit?
For me, I would actually have to say Victoria. And not just because I love you guys. There are actually a lot of reasons for that. Number one is you still have that gorgeous, amazing hall there in Victoria. Number two is I actually have a very old friend of mine from back in the days when I used to go to Kimberley every summer, Robin Tozak. When she was still in high school and I was in college, her mom used to go to all the accordion events. So I would, end up spending about 2 weeks out of every summer hanging out with her, because her mom playing accordion and her not playing accordion, she would get dragged to all these festivals. And, would try and find some other fairly younger people to do things with. So Robin and I go back probably about 25 years or something like that. We've known each other forever. But also because you guys and all of the lodges there in Victoria have such vital, interesting lodges. Because I've visited lodges that have big, impressive halls, but it's 6 people twice a month who show up and complain a lot. And that's not necessarily something that I would put at the top of my bucket list. But you guys have the perfect situation. Really dynamic, interesting lodges, a beautiful hall, really wonderful connections to the community. And if COVID ever ends, the border will reopen and I'll be able to go to Canada again.
Just need a shot in the arm. Wait 6 months.
That's right.
I want to go to that meeting that happens in a cave every year.
Yeah,
Somebody
Yes.
in California
Yes.
has this like meeting that happens in a cave every year, and
Yeah,
that's
the
like on
cave
my
degree.
bucket list. Tell me about it.
Yeah.
What is it?
So the cave degree is the second degree. They only do the second degree there. You could watch a video of that degree on Mel Astrahan's, but anyway,
I want to go.
you want to save it. Okay, so for my bucket list, of course, number one would be y'all. I done got my passport updated just in time for COVID and for the borders to close. But I updated my passport for y'all. And then number two, I think, would be, is it Volcano Lodge in California? The one that's like the old-fashioned cowboy town, gaslit lodge that has all the old stuff.
Yeah, that's Volcano.
I think Volcano would be a hard number two right behind y'all. Yeah.
I'm not too sure. At this point, any lodge would be great. I just want to get into one, so I can't be picky. Yeah, I really don't know. There's this one. We had a Oddfellow temple in downtown Los Angeles that closed, but if you go to my lodge's website, there's still some pictures where it still has like the 3 links and the decor outside. So that's something I'm just dying to get into, just to kind of see how it is and all that. Other than that, everything and anything.
Billy, you got any?
Well, I've stood in front of Market and 7th in San Francisco, but the lodge I want to go to a meeting at is Waxahachie 80.
Yeah.
Texas.
Good one.
Nice.
It's a good one.
Yeah, they're very active.
Yeah.
And Josh,
Oliver
what about
Peck
you?
is actually doing a guest spot about 2 hours from me in the next couple weeks. And too bad we're not having lodge meetings, because I definitely get hold of, try to see if I could get his ass down here. But for a podcast,
Yeah.
Nice.
You know,
I don't have that. I don't have that pull.
When you were still getting your passport updated, Ainsley, I was thinking, there are baseball games going on in St. Louis, and I could always zip into St. Louis and then stroll east to Tuscola.
Yes, that
But
is a possibility.
Again, this Rona thing.
I know.
The
And
best thing
on
about
your
Ainsley's Lodge is
way,
you can sleep in the lodge.
You can.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can sleep
Yeah.
on the couch.
You-
at the lodge
Right
and
by
stay-
the
You would literally
right
sleep in
between
the
the
ante
fridge and
room.
the stove.
yeah. But yeah, on your way over, you'd have to stop in Greenville to stop at the Des Moines Museum to
Yes.
see their goats.
Yeah, that's what I need, a photo of me on a goat.
Too many goats, not enough time.
I know. I know.
Hey, you guys, this has been an amazing event. And I just want to thank you guys for all the inspiration that you give us every day with your podcasts. It feels like we're a little team, the 5 of us. And
Absolutely.
it's nice to have the connection. And we have to do this one at least once a year like this.
Agreed.
Yes.
Agreed.
Absolutely. And once again, thank you so much to you guys there at Modern Goat Rider. You know, sometimes our podcast feels like it's going crazy and it's about to go off the rails, especially when we have our guest host, Christopher, join in. But you two are always so very calm and relaxed about everything. I listen to it and I go, yeah, that's what professionals are supposed to sound like.
It's that calm
yeah, right.
Canadian
Come
demeanor.
God,
That's
really.
right.
Yeah.
You all so kind to us.
Yeah, we listen to you guys when we want to actually know facts and what's really happening out there. We're just making it up as we go along.
Do not fact check our show. Do not fact check. I tried fact checking one of our guests and love him to bits. I was like,
yeah, that didn't sound right.
Didn't sound right. So
well, nobody's fact checked our president episode.
Yeah.
Sometimes
there's like an angry AP US history teacher out there, or like Scott Moy, or somebody who's like, no, that's not it at all. That is not what Grant did.
Yeah. One thing that in putting that episode together, I found it a little bit disappointing that it wasn't easier to have an official source of Oddfellows history that we could go to and say, oh, that is the true information. Like, everybody thinks Harry Truman was an Oddfellow, but I found some research on his presidential library website. You can listen to an address he gave to the executive committee of Sovereign Grand Lodge, where he said, I have never had an opportunity to join your organization. And yet Harry Truman keeps getting repeated on these lists of Oddfellows. And not that I want to dissuade us from promoting ourselves, because that is something Odd Fellowship needs. I would like it to be accurate, though.
Yes.
It's a good idea.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said about the Oddfellows in the history, and we use it, but really it's the here, it's now, and it's where are you going? It's like every day you get up in the morning and you say, okay, yesterday was really great, or yesterday wasn't the best. But here I am in my routine, and I've got to go forth for today. Yeah. And I think we as an order need to think of that as, okay, here's where we are today. We used to have 1.2 or 2.1, whatever the number is. We've got this many now, and we have lodges growing. Let's focus on them. And with our heart in our hand, let's talk to the lodges that are not doing well and give them some guidance, or make some changes that are like, this is what you need to do to survive. Love your hall, love your traditions, love your community. And if you are successful at that, things will start to happen for your hall and your lodge. It's inevitable, but don't hang yourself hang your hat just on Charlie Chaplin.
Yeah. Well said, brothers. Well said.
Thanks.
Funny story here. I also belong to Sons of Norway, although I very rarely attend meetings. I think I've been to 3 meetings in 25 years of membership. But Sons of Norway is almost identical to Odd Fellowship, even down to the original name. It was the Independent Order of Sons of Norway. So a year ago, last spring, I was at a Sons of Norway meeting, and I was actually performing there. So do the ceremonial music, wait, and they open the meeting and they start, and there's a point where it's almost exactly the same as the opening of an Oddfellows meeting, and it's where they stand to sing the Norwegian national anthem. And so they said the line, I forget exactly what it was, and I just instinctively stood up and almost went into the valediction, because it's just like what the vice grand says at the end of lodge. And I was like, I am an Oddfellow. Oh, wait. No, we're going to sing now. Okay.
Everybody stops and looks. They're like, yes, you are.
Yeah, I guess so.
Hilarious.
All right.
It's kind of like when you get home from work and then you like answer the phone, but you answer the phone with your work voice and you're
yeah.
Hello, da-da-da-da.
Yeah, Josh Miller speaking.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Cool. All right. So, we'll just
see how it goes here. See where the snip is, and definitely at the beginning of your segment, make sure that you go. You have to check out this segment first, and we'll do the same at the end of our segment. We'll be like, get the end of the story. You got to do that. Download this from this place, right?
Yeah. Find a good cliffhanger somewhere in the middle, so you can leave it unresolved, and people will go, what happens next? I've got to listen.
I was actually at the hour mark. I saw the hour mark, and I was gonna be like, "What the hell is that?" And then it was gonna be, "Oh, it's just Billy's dog." It's okay.
See, that's right up Sergio's alley because he likes doing the really kind of theatrical stuff with the episodes. Did you hear his funeral narration we did as a teaser? Wasn't that amazing?
It was excellent.
Thank you.
He was
Recorded in the
ghoulish.
bathtub, sipping on bubbly. Eloquence all the way.
Oh, that Los Angeles life, man.
Oh yeah, pinky out, man. Pinky
The
out.
isolation booth.
Okay, guys, I've got to go. I've got a 10 p.m. phone call for work. So I wish you all a good day, good evening.
Yes, thank you so much, brothers. This was
Thanks,
great.
guys.
Yes.
Take care.
Get some
All
to do
right,
this again.
Good night, everyone.
Great job.
Good night.
Great job.